I heard Ms. Pagel, as I did Mr. Pica, endorse the legislation, which I introduced with Mr. Holt and Mr. Cajalva, that calls for a larger collection of revenues from the oil industry and from the mining industry as an alternative to drilling in the Arctic Refuge. And I think that is directly pertinent because they both offered an alternative to the proposal which the majority has before the committee. And I think that's right on point. In fact, as we heard earlier, upwards of $300 billion can be collected from going down that route, whereas only $600 million can be collected from the route that the majority is proposing over the next 10 years. So I think that's right on the money, and it just kind of deals with the oil industry and the mining industry as they right now get away without paying their fair share of the dues to live in our country while putting the burden on others and asking for a sacrifice to be made by, in this instance, an area of our country which has often been compared to the African Serengeti. So I think it's right on point. And maybe, Professor Brinkley, you could put this in perspective for us, okay, this question of what it is that we receive because we would try to preserve this area from having oil and other natural resources be drilled for on this location.
Well, you know, I come at this as somebody who loves America. We sing the song America the Beautiful, and we choose treasure landscapes in this country, and we protect them with our lives. Theodore Roosevelt used to say, the Europeans can keep the Louvre and Westminster Abbey, but we have the Tetons, we have Redwood, California, we have the Grand Canyon. Arctic Alaska is a very significant landscape to the psyche of the American people. When you study U.S. history, wilderness is something to be treasured and preserved, particularly in the 20th century, because it reestablishes the American spirit. Many soldiers, people that were veterans from Vietnam, go up to the Arctic Refuge with backpack on to hike. Recreation dollars for the Arctic Refuge, people, myself included, camping up there. It's a ecotourism, as I write about in a book I recently did, The Quiet World, with people at Denali Lodge. Nobody thought people were going to come to Mount McKinley. Nobody thought people were going to come to see glaciers up the Inside Passage. Ecotourism is a huge industry for Alaska. To talk about saving of the Arctic is to talk about the money of the Arctic. And more as the world shrinks, you're going to have people looking for true wildernesses. The Arctic Refuge is called the last wilderness. Incidentally, it's always been called the Arctic Refuge until the oil lobby started calling it ANWR, because it sounds like Anwar Sadat or some country in the Middle East. Do you want to drill ANWR? Yes. Do you want to molest Eisenhower's Great Wildlife Reserve? No. So it's the way the issues frame. But what I've found odious over the past 50 years are people that have been saying there's no biological heart to the Arctic Refuge, that it's a wasteland, there's nothing there, a few caribou rubbing their bellies against pipes. And I know, in particular, Mr. Young knows better than that because I know he's a trapper and spent time up there. The question becomes, what price? How buyable are Americans? How low do we get when we start taking our key heirlooms and we start selling them to Dutch Royal Shell or British Petroleum? BP's recent report had walruses living in the Gulf of Mexico. Do we think that they know how to drill up in the Arctic? They don't. We've had spill on the tundra. This is a very fragile and special ecosystem, and the Arctic and Antarctica are World Heritage Centers. There's going to be drilling that goes on up there, but when we have our nation's largest wildlife preserve, the crown jewel of 500 wildlife reserves, and to be even suggesting in 2011, in a time of climate crisis, that we're going to drill the Arctic Refuge, it's become a political issue, and I think it needs to be taken out of the committee, taken out of Congress. I think President Obama needs to sign an executive order creating a national monument for further federal protection within the Arctic Refuge.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you for raising Mo Udall's name. The first day he was here as chairman was my first day on the committee 35 years ago.
They're a great American family, the Udall family.
And so thank you so much for raising his name and memory, because it means a lot to so many of us on the committee.